Let's see what happens. How cool is that? You know how like movies sometimes like drop to a low frame rate? Like, ever since like, Spider-Verse became a monumental success and we had like, I don't know, like Turtles movie or something trying to copy it, right? But basically the effect of a low frame rate is actually really interesting, right? And so the only way to naturally get low frame rate is just to lag. You just gotta be on like a poor device to get like 15 frames per second. But I've just been like, playing around right here and I've found something which I would say is like half gameplay and like half optical illusion in the way that like the effect that you get with the low frame rate isn't what you think it is, but it basically is what you think it is. I know that makes zero sense, but let me show you an example right now, okay? If I play the game, this is my character, okay? I'm walking around. I have a really, really good device, okay? So, my frame rate is actually very high. So what if I right now wanted to turn this character into 15 frames per second, okay? And I'll make it a bit more challenging. Only this character. So all of this will still remain the same. So if I want to like turn my camera around, it's still going to be fluent, right? The base plate, the spawn location, the skybox, they're still going to like move around with my camera at 60 FPS or like, however much I have. But my character is only allowed to move at a low frame rate. So how can we achieve that? Well, the first thing we need to understand is how do games even render stuff, okay? Like genuinely, let's think about this. If I make a script right now, right? There is a thing inside of Roblox, and I assume a lot of other, game engines, called the run service, okay? And basically this thing lets you detect whenever like a render happens, or like after a render happens, or like, physics simulation has completed. Basically, this thing is all about rendering, physics, etc. And there's a function here, or not a function, sorry, an event called render stepped, which if I connect it to a function, it gives us this thing called delta time, which is a number. So if I just call it delta, and then I print delta, right? What this is gonna do is every single time it renders a frame, or sorry, before it renders a frame, it's gonna print out the delta, right? If you don't know what that means right now, don't worry, I'm gonna show you, right? Right, that's my bad. So I forgot that rendering happens locally, right? Because what rendering is, it basically just like tells your device, hey, listen, we have these like, 3D models here and everything, and we need you to show them to the player, right? This is why if both of us play the same game, but you're using some like, old Nokia phone and I'm here with like my MacBook, I will get a higher frame rate than you, even though we are playing the same game, right? The reason being is because your device is worse, and so it just does rendering slower, which hence the low frame rate. But then how do renders even happen, right? Well, in short, right, and this is a very like dumbed down version, I know I'm sure some like expert can, come here and say, actually, you got this tiny thing wrong, right? Basically, the way I understand it and the way I've always, perceived it is that it's effectively your device every, single like very small like millisecond or whatever, every single like small period of time, it effectively updates what you see on screen. Even it's actually doing this right now, even as I'm moving around. Every single like little fraction of a second, it's basically doing a lot of math to understand like, okay, if I'm in this position and then this spawn location is in that position, well then how can we draw this 3D object to actually appear 3D? As I'm moving around every single fraction of a second, it's basically redrawing this over and over and over, okay? Now, again, I could be wrong with Roblox Studio specifically, but I know that a lot of games and a lot of engines actually do it in this way. And all we have to do is just mimic this. Genuinely, all we have to do is effectively, and I know this sounds a little weird, we have to create our own game engine inside of Roblox Studio to even be able to make our character a lower frame rate than everything else in the game. How do we basically make a drawing of our character inside of the game? Well, this is where something called GUI comes in, okay? In case you don't know, GUI is user interface, and it's just stuff like, it's a button, right? Or like, I don't know, text box, you could add like, yeah, buttons, images, like if I had a button here, I can like move it around. Basically, user interface is a 2D thing that is on your screen. But the thing is, have you ever seen those like videos where it's like someone takes like a 2D object and specifically, does some complex math or like, a lot of work and makes it look 3D? Because that's effectively what's going on here, right? If you really think about this right now, right, this like 3D world, quote unquote, is just a bunch of 2D images, but there's like a lot of complex math going on to move these images and stretch them to make them look 3D, right? Again, I'm not sure if Roblox Studio specifically does this, but like I said, a lot of game engines do this. So we just need to take a piece of GUI, right? And then like every like 0.1 seconds, let's say, we want it to update based on the player's position and the camera's position, right? To showcase the player's character. So if we make it do that, and let's say if I hide the player's actual 3D model and I only show like the GUI that we're making, and the GUI updates every 0.1 seconds, that's going to give us our low frames per second effect. Did anything that I just say make sense to you, right? Probably not, but that's a good thing because you're here to learn, right? If you already knew all of this, this would be a pretty boring video. We're very lucky in the sense that like we don't have to take a text button and try to turn it into like a character model, right? Roblox actually comes with something called a viewport frame, right? In short, all you have to know, a viewport frame is effectively where you can put a model inside of this. Like I can put like a part, for example. And then inside of this, I also need to put a camera, right? I'll take this camera. And so then in the viewport frame, if I set the current camera property to be this camera, as you can see, the part is visible. So this part only exists inside the viewport frame. It's not like an actual real thing that affects the 3D world, right? It's just in its own little world, and we can see it inside of this viewport frame. Only we can see it. Other players can't see this unless they obviously have the same like viewport frame. So then what we could do is we could take this viewport frame, right? We could scale it up to be like taking up the entire screen. And I'll just check something called ignore GUI inset, just because like it's going to fill up the entire screen. Otherwise it would like leave space open for like buttons, and we don't want that. And so if you think about it, what we could do is we could take this viewport frame, right? We could set the background transparency equal to 1, right? And then what we could do is every single 0.1 seconds, we could just take every single part that's inside of our character. We could place it inside of this viewport frame. And then, yeah, they basically just it. We can just do that every 0.1 seconds, right? Now, obviously, things will get a bit more confusing if we want to, let's say, make the entire game low frame rate, which I will show you how to do as well. But for now, let's just focus on an easier part. Okay, so I'll delete the camera, I'll delete the part, and then let's make a local script. So we need to actually access the viewport frame and our character, right? Which we can do by saying local viewport is equal to script.parents wait for child word. So script.parents is the screen GUI, and then we're waiting for the viewport frame inside of the screen GUI. And so then all we need is just the character. So I can say local car is equal to player, game.players local player. So we can get the player who is currently playing the game. This is only available on local scripts, by the way. If I were to use a server script, it wouldn't be able to get a local player, right? Just thought, that'd be a fun little trivia. We're going to try and get the player's character. We're going to try the same thing with, game.players, local player, blah, blah, blah. But here we're going to wait until the character is added, okay? So we either get the character immediately, or if the character doesn't exist, we're going to wait for it. It's going to give us the character, and then either way, we get the character. And so then we just need to make a while loop. So while task.wait, let's say 0.1. Okay, actually, no, let's just do nothing. Okay, let's just do while task.wait, which basically is going to make it update as fast as possible. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to loop through our character. Okay, so I'll say for I, v in character get children do. So we're going to loop through every single item that's inside of our character, right? Ignore I doesn't mean anything right now. We can actually set it to be an underscore, meaning we're not going to use this. V in this case is equal to the actual item we're looping through. So we can actually name it to like item, or I'll just keep it V, okay? We need to check if V is an actual part. So if V is a base part, right? Then what we're going to do is we're basically going to clone this part. So I can say local new part is equal to V clone. Okay, we're going to clone the part, and then I'll just say local new part dot parent is equal to the viewport, right? And the very last thing we ought to do is just before we do this, because what we want to do, right, is we don't want to just keep on continuously adding parts into the viewport. We want to add the part, and then we want to delete the parts, and then we want to add new ones, right? Otherwise, that would just cause a huge memory leak. So the way we do this is we just say viewport clear all children. So we're clearing all children, and then we're filling it up with new ones, and then we're filling it up with new parts, and then we're just doing the same thing. So if I right now run the game, what's going to happen? Okay, obviously something is a little wrong, but we're getting there. All right, so the problem here is that I forgot to add a camera for the viewport frame, right? So what we need to do is we want to make sure, right, that whatever we see on the viewport frame is what our player sees, right? So I don't want this character to be here, right? I want the character to actually match with my character. If my character moves over here, I want this character to actually look like this, right? Or, if I move my camera around, I want the character to also rotate alongside with my character. Because right now, when I'm rotating, it's just staying still. And that is because the viewport frame only has one camera that's not moving, right? So I want to make the viewport frame's current camera equal to my camera, right? This one, the one that's moving right now. And the way we do this is actually insanely simple, right? You'd be surprised. It's just a viewport current camera is equal to workspace current camera, which is our camera. Now if I do this, there we go. Look at that. It's like an X-ray of sorts. Now, obviously, a small issue is that it doesn't actually allow like stuff like accessories to pass through. So the only thing that it can actually show, or no, it does allow accessories, but that would just be like a little too much work, right? For now, all we can really do is just show the actual parts, right? So like I have headphones, I have my, Chad bodybuilding suit, but it's not going to really let us do that without much, work. And something interesting to see is that even though like it looks like we're actually inside of, my character, because this is GUI, it'll always be in front of whatever is like in the 3D world. This arm, right? It's literally blocking the face of the head, even though it shouldn't, right? The head should technically be in front of this arm, but it isn't, right? That's basically how GUI works. And I can actually show this to you as well by like, if I right now like were to stand here or something, right? The character like isn't seen through the spawn location, but the GUI is, right? Because all this is just a set of images. And so now you might be thinking, okay, how do we make this a little more realistic, right? The issue with my avatar is that I have a bunch of like stuff and everything, but what I could do is I could just make a brand new avatar, right? I could just make this into like a rig, for example. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to name this to starter character, and you'll see why in a bit, okay? I'm going to go to the humanoid and I'm going to just like set display distance to none, and I'm going to set health display to always off. What these two basically do is it just hides the name, right? And it also hides the health, right? So all we get is just the character, which is what we want. And what I need to do is I need to take this character and I need to put it inside of starter player, right? If you put a character inside of starter player named starter character, exactly like this, then it's going to override the player's character, which will make it look like the starter character, right? There we go, like so. So I know you can't actually, see the model, but it's there, right? So look at that. And so now the big question is, right, what if we do, instead of task.wait, and all of this, what if instead of, doing task.wait and trying to wait for as little as possible, what if we make it wait for 0.1 seconds? So nothing seems to be wrong right now, right? However, if I were to go move, as you can see, all of this is just images that are trying to update to my player, right? Now, the issue here is that obviously, because my player is actually visible, like the actual character is visible, it doesn't really make for like a good looking, low frame rate character. So really all we gotta do is, because we're actually in control of what character the player has, we can just take all of these parts, right? All of these, and just set their transparency equal to 1, meaning they're going to be invisible, right? And the face as well, we can take the face and set the transparency of the face also equal to 1. But the issue with doing this though is that, well, now the parts are invisible, right? Now we don't see the character, nor do we see the actual like parts inside of the viewport, because even though it's creating them, they're invisible. So all we got to do is we just need to say new part dot transparency is equal to 0. So as you may remember, new part is the thing that goes inside of the viewport, right? So the character will be invisible, but not the stuff on the viewport. And there we go. Look at that. We have a big cube in the middle of us. That's the humanoid root part. So let me just fix that up real quick. Yeah, so I'm just checking if it's not named humanoid root part. So if it's not named humanoid root part, well, then what we do, there we go. Look at that. We literally just have created our own, I don't even know if this is like 15 frames or 20 frames or whatever, but like how cool does this look? And another thing you might have noticed actually is that when I rotate my camera, it actually doesn't feel laggy. It's only laggy when my character actually moves around. But if I try to rotate, it's all fine. And the reason being is because like I set it equal to the current camera. So the moment I set the viewport's current camera equal to our camera, that's it, right? It's always just going to follow along with what our camera actually sees, right? If we want to make everything low frame rate, which like I'll show you in a bit, right? What we basically have to do is just make our own new camera and then just, copy over some properties of our camera into the new camera and then, make it update every 0.1 seconds. That would work, okay? But for now, let's actually just figure out how can we make this better? How can we make this, low frame rate character just look nicer in general? Well, immediately the first two things I notice is number one, he has no face, okay? That's kind of bad. And number two, he doesn't seem like he's like the same like brightness as the other character. So let's fix the face first, okay? The face is inside the head and it's a decal, okay? So really all we gotta do, we need to check if the parts that we're going through have a decal inside of them. And if they do, well then we need to set the transparency of that decal to 0. And so the way we do this is we just say if new parts, and then we say find first child of class, and then we need to say decal, okay? So if we find something inside of the part that is a decal, well then what we do is we just need to copy this line, right? Like so. And then we just need to say dot transparency equal to 0. And if I do it like this, then the face should start showing up just like so. Look at that. That is insanely cool. Now, the other thing as well, like I said, is that like the character that we're making here isn't as bright as our actual character, right? And this is an easy fix. Viewport frame, light color, just set it to fully white, okay? And we set this to fully white as well. And so what this is going to do is now if I play the game, There we go. Look at that. That looks a lot more like realistic to our character than what it did before. And yeah, I don't know, like doesn't this just look so cool? This is like I said, it's like half optical illusion, but like half real gameplay, right? Because my character still technically exists, right? So, you know, if let's say there's like some kill brick. So for example, let me actually show you this in action, right? If I right now make a part, right? And then if I just make this a kill brick, so I just make a script inside of the part, and I just say, you know, parts, or no, script.parent.touched, right? So whenever the part is actually touched, we're gonna get the other part that touched this part, and then we'll just say if other parts.parent find first child humanoid, right? Meaning that the other part.parent is the player. Then we're just gonna say other parts.parent find first child humanoid.health, right, is equal to 0. And so if I play this right now, right, let's say, you know, this is like some, I don't know, very retro game where like, you know, your character's moving at like a low frame rate and he encounters an obstacle. Look at that. How cool is that? And it still works with respawning as well. So we still have like an invisible character to act like the hitbox, but then the actual character that, you know, we see still functions the way we want it to. Perfect. The only, like, I guess, issue is that because the character is updating every like 0.1 seconds, it might not be like too accurate, right? Like I don't know, like, right, like he technically, if we, you know, play that frame by frame, he died before we saw him touching it, right? But like, again, that's a very small issue, and yeah, this just looks, I don't know. So now the question is, right, how can we make it so that the camera itself is actually low frame rate? And so like I said, this is fairly easy, right? We just gotta say local new cam, like so, is equal to instance.new camera. So we can create a brand new camera. Then what we do is we just say new cam, right? And we set the C frame of this new camera equal to the workspace current camera.C frame. So whatever is the camera's current position is going to be the position of our new camera. And then we're just going to say viewport.current camera is equal to new cam. And I just realized because we're making the camera and then we're going to clear all children, that's just going to delete the camera. So I probably should clear all children first and then create the new camera and then create the parts. If I do it like this, right, here's what's going to happen. As you can see, now that I'm moving the camera, it actually does look quite nice, right? Yeah, so the effects that this creates are phenomenal, genuinely. Let's try this again. Okay, that, I don't know, it just adds to the charm of the game. Okay, maybe we'd want to disable the new camera when he dies, because then this does look kind of weird, I'll be honest. And the last thing I want to try and do, right, is what if we just try and take every single part, right, every single part, and then, you know, set, so right now all we're doing is we're just taking the stuff that's inside of our character and then, you know, putting it inside of the viewport. But what if we do it with the character and also with this part and with the base plate and with the spawn location? What if we select all of them and then just set their transparency equal to 1, like so, right? And, you know, both of these have decals and, you know, a texture as well, apparently. So I could just set the transparency of both of these equal to 1 as well. And so then instead of doing character get children, I can just do workspace, right? Workspace get descendants. So we're going to check if it is a base part, and if it's not a humanoid root part, we're going to clone the part, set the transparency to 0. If it's a decal, we're setting the transparency to 0. And we this has a texture, apparently, right? So we probably also should do the same thing, but except for a decal, we should make it for a texture like so. And so let's see, if I actually play right now, what's going to happen? Cannot clone terrain. Why is it trying to clone terrain? Who knows? I guess we gotta sell, oh yeah, not V is a terrain. Even though I'm not looking for terrain, I'm looking for a base part, but I guess the terrain counts as a base part somehow, so it cannot be terrain. So we're not gonna get that error soon, hopefully. The colors look really weird. If I move, actually, yeah, look, when I'm rotating the camera, the sun is fine, but everything else is laggy. That is so interesting. Something I'm actually wondering right now. Would it be possible for us to make the character like the only thing with a high frame rate? Look at that. Camera, yeah, no, this just looks like a laggy game. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but yeah, I don't know. I thought this would look cooler than it actually does. I guess maybe let's just set the viewport's current camera back to how it was before, right? Like, how is that gonna look? Because that actually might be just because of the camera. What if I take this the brick and I try and move it? Can I do that? Can I set the part's position equal to like, let's see, let's say 50. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's cool to see. Okay, so other parts also are like moving properly. You know, like properly as in like, you know, according to their frame rate. But like, yeah, that's interesting, I guess. I liked it when it only like affected the character, right? Because I don't know, like what we just did here just looks weird, right? And also, again, let's change the viewport current camera back to the workspace current camera. Yeah, this looks a lot nicer and everything is still transparent as it was before. But I guess the very last thing I want to try to do is, could we make a system where if I press a button like E, for example, right? Could I switch between between my real character and this fake character. So let's try, okay? So right before we do the while loop, because if I try to do it after, it's not going to work, because the while loop basically just like ends the code forever, right? So I need to make it before. So I need to say game.userInputService, and then we're going to say input began connect function. And here I can check if the input.keycode is equal to a key code of, let's say, E, okay? So whenever I press E, then what do we want to happen? Well, first of all, I probably want the viewport to stop showing up, right? I probably want, this fake character of mine to basically toggle its visibility, right? And the way I can do this is I can say script.parent.enabled is equal to not script.parent.enabled. So basically it's going to toggle the visibility, which means that, now it's visible. If I press E, now it's not visible. And if I press E again, it's back to being visible. This is very nice, but what we have to do right now, obviously, is also when it's invisible, we can't just have it stay invisible. We want to add our original character back in. And so this is just another case of where we get the loop, right? So we're going to toggle the visibility of the viewport, then we're going to loop through the character. But then instead of just like, making a new part, because we don't want to do that, right? We want to take the original parts, okay? Because we're not making a new part. We need to take V, right? So I'm going to delete that line. We're going to say V.transparency, because that's the part, is equal to 1 minus V.transparency, right? This will toggle the part's transparency, which in case you don't know what that means, basically like if the part's transparency is 1, we want it to be 0, right? So then it's 1 minus 1 is going to make it 0. However, if the part's transparency is 0 and we want to make it 1, then it's going to be 1 minus 0, which is 1, right? So this just toggles the transparency. And we got to do the same thing with the decal, right? So if v find first child decal, then transparency is going to be equal to the same thing, 1 minus whatever the transparency of the decal currently is. And I'm just going to delete this line as well. So if I play the game right now, let's see what happens. Look at that. Now, something to keep in mind as well, I'm just noticing, is that the shadow actually disappears when we switch to our low frame rate character, which actually, I guess, does add to the fact that like, oh yeah, here we're 3D and here we're 2D. It kind of does add on to the factor. But if you want to, you could also just go through, the character. So you could go through all of their parts. Again, this is just up to you. You could just select all of them and set cast shadow equal to false, right? So if you do it like this, it just kind of makes it a little more smoother to actually transition between them. But like I said, all of this is your choice, right? If you want the shadow, if you want to make it more 3D, then go ahead. And so what I'm thinking right now, right, is if this video gets to 10K likes, which I normally don't do this, right? But I'm just like thinking, if this video gets to 10K likes, I'm going to challenge myself and I'm going to release this as like a test game, right? And what I mean by this is right now we only see our character, right? So we don't actually see the characters of other players, right? And the issue here is that like, because we can now toggle, what if let's say we have because you could make the argument like, oh yeah, you could just go through every single character and then just, make them visible. What's hard about that? Well, the thing is like, what if the character then toggles themselves, right? If the character wants to be a regular character and not, this like fake, 2D GUI, how can my character know that? And so yeah, 10K likes and I'll release this game as like a basically like fully fledged out playground where you can like, experiment with like, the way this works. I'm gonna, like add some more cool like stuff you could do with the GUI. And yeah, like I said, 10K likes. So unironically, this was insanely fun to make. If you want to code exactly like I do, because I'm literally the best coder to ever exist. Like you cannot name a coder better than me. So if you want to code like I do, because I'm literally the best coder to ever step foot on this planet, right? I do have a course in the description, so, you can go check that out. And yeah, so, as always, we're back to basics. Thank you for watching.